All right, welcome back. So we just got finished talking about population ecology and how different species affect the populations within the ecosystem. So for this, let's talk about one of the most interesting species on planet Earth, the human species. So human population, let's go. Let's just jump right into it. Some of you have asked some interesting questions. I think this is the most interesting part of the human population, Earth's carrying capacity for humans. So if you take a look at these charts, humans have a exponential growth. So right up here, that's our human growth. And this dotted line represents the ability to feed that population. So that's our food supply right there. And theoretically, if that were to continue at a linear pace and our population on an exponential pace, there is going to be a time where we run out of food. And that's pretty bad. Some of you were asking about carrying capacity for humans in class. My guess would be right around here is where carrying capacity starts coming into play because we don't have enough food to support our population, and our population needs to start declining. But humans are smart, we are versatile, and we find ways down here to innovate our agricultural production. So this could be just some kind of significant improvement in agriculture technology to allow us to produce more food to support a higher population. And if you see right here, here's innovation. Boom, this theoretical line goes up. We can support more people. This J curve can continually increase. So there are some things that affect the human population growth. So first off the bat, the study of human populations is known as demography. And if human population growth interests you, there are tons of jobs out there in demography. You could get into this stuff. You can get paid for this. It's pretty cool. So some things that affect population growth, births and deaths, obviously. Migration, how many people are moving in and out of certain countries, whatever we're talking about. Fertility, how the people living in that country can actually reproduce. Life expectancy, if you don't have a high life expectancy in a certain country, your population probably isn't going to be growing that fast. And age structures, we're going to be looking at age structure diagrams later in class. Shout out to Jeremy Quinn. He pointed out so eloquently that some of them look like Christmas trees. So we'll see them at a later time. When we're talking about population increase and decrease, we're going to be talking about birth and death rates. And when we talk about birth rates and death rates, we're talking about how many people are being born and how many people are being dead per 1,000 people in an area in a given year. So not just total births and deaths. So keep that in mind as we look at this next graphic. So check this out. First graphic up here, this is the world population. Yellow is birth rate, blue is death rate. So you can see that the world on a whole is the population is increasing. So this is your exponential growth right here. If you look at developed countries, so like USA, for example, is a developed country, we don't have that much higher of a birth rate than a death rate. So it's pretty close to even. We're still growing, but not as crazy fast as all of the developing countries. So if you take a look at developing countries, their birth rate is way higher than their death rate. And then even more so if you disregard China. So this data is a little bit out of date. This doesn't take into account China's recent policy changes. So China used to have a policy called the One Child Act. So you could only have one kid. So obviously that would limit your birth rate over death rate. So this just showed back when that was a thing, the developing countries' birth rate was way higher. So China changed a little bit, but we're going to be talking about that later in class. So if you haven't heard about the One Child Act or the Two Child Policy or anything like that, we'll be talking about that. So overall, you need to know developed country versus developing country. So take a second, pause the video, jot this down. This is the most important thing of this entire video. This might seem familiar to your summer assignment. So this isn't the first time you've heard this. So developed country is just really industrialized, has a lot of money flow, and developing country is not as industrialized and not a lot of money flow. So let's take a look at maybe some developing countries. Let's go right after this. So we have percent of world's population. You can see that red is developed and yellow is developing. And most of the population in the world is living in developing countries. So keep that in mind. Most of the world's population growth, so how much the population is growing, is usually in developing countries. But all that being said, more people living in developing countries and more population growth in developing countries, the wealth and the money flow and the income is pretty much all in developed countries. And if they have all of that wealth and income, they can spend it on resources. So look at all this resource use in developed countries. And well, when you use more resources, you are creating more pollution and waste. So that's in developed countries too, as compared to the developing countries. So here's some developing countries. You need to know India and China. These are the two biggest developing countries. But then you've got, I know Africa is not a country, it is a continent, but most of the countries in Africa are developing. And then you've got some smaller countries like Pakistan, Nigeria, Bangladesh, Indonesia. All of these are growing really quickly. Here's a list of countries in the world. If you take a look at the top, China, India, huge population. So this data is a little bit out of date. This is actually from the old environmental science textbook, but the new one doesn't really have a lot of hard population data. So I think this will help you understand it a little bit better. China and India, way, way, way higher. That's most of the world population in there. And then USA, still third place. We're sitting around, what, 315 million, something like that. So between 2004's projection or current data and 2025's projected data, we're pretty much on the mark in growing. So this is pretty accurate data. And then you've got Indonesia, Brazil, all of these other countries. If you take a look at a couple of these countries, though, if you haven't pointed them out yet, if you look at Russia and you got Japan, they are actually on the decline. So when we look at population pyramids, you're going to notice that some countries, their population is actually declining. And there's some reasons that go into that too. One last thing, make sure this goes on your notes. We use the idea of doubling time to determine how long it takes for a population to double itself in size. So if you think about that for a second, whatever the population is right now, how long will it take to actually double itself? That's a crazy concept if you think about it. But if the human population is increasing exponentially, it kind of makes sense because you're going to hit that double every so often. So if you take, this is how you do doubling time. We use the rule of 70, and it works in math class, it works in calculus, it works in statistics, it works with bacteria, and it works with human population. So all you do is you take 70, the rule of 70, you divide that by the growth rate of the country. So for example, really easy, if Nigeria is increasing at 2.8% a year, that's a growth rate. How long will it take for them to double? Just take 70 divided by that growth rate. Don't convert it into any weird decimals or anything. Just take it as a percentage because you're dividing it by the rate, which is a percent. So 70 divided by that 2.8. And if you plug that in your calculator, it comes out to a nice even 25 years. That means that Nigeria in 25 years will double its population. Whatever it is now, 25 years, it will be double. So that's doubling time. That's the rule of 70. And you have just completed part 1 of your human population notes. Part 2 coming at you soon.